Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for another video. Today I'm going to do something I haven't done on the channel so far, but it is art related and we are art and animals here at FlyOn. I'm going to tell you about all the books I read in 2024. So I have done book-related content on this channel before, mostly through House of the Dragon, like book versus show differences. Huge Game of Thrones fan and all of that. I've read, my highest count was 101 books a year. I have not come close to that in a while. I had a job where I could put audiobooks on all day and I would just churn them out and listen, and it was fantastic, and then read at home, and it was a lot, but I was really proud of myself for that. But my reading motivation has been low. Books have been a love of my life, my whole life. I've got over 2,000 in the house, and I participate in a free book location that's not exactly a free library, but I digress. Sometimes I have my bookcase showing over here a little bit just because I think it looks cool. But I read 17 books in 2024. I'm trying to do some kind of like wrap up the year videos, and I had this idea and I thought it might be fun to show you. So if I had to choose a theme for my 2024 reading, it would be Dune. I saw the second Dune movie, got super into the world building. I'm gonna try to go fast so that like this isn't an hour long, but we'll see what happens with this. I read this after I watched the first movie that came out, 2023 maybe, and then read this because I wanted to see how the story ended, and then watched the second movie and then reread it. Technically, I think I just reread the second part, which is like what the second movie was based on. There is kind of a bigger time jump in here. Some of the things are completely different from the movie. Others are very true to the movie. Sometimes I think the book was right. Some things I think the movie got right, like Fade Rotha. I'm loving this universe, and I'm going to skip going into it in depth because I could probably go on and on and on because I'm really immersed in the Dune universe now. There are 23 books in the series, in the like official Dune universe. 6 of them were written by the original author, Frank Herbert. The others were written by his son, and I think there was one other dude. Oh, I don't know. I'll list everything below. I don't know how this is gonna work yet because I usually do make up like videos like in this format. But yeah, I've tried to read it before and haven't been able to get into it. So if you've had that problem, I recommend actually watching the movie to get to know it a little better and understand like the different types of worlds and people and cultures and languages and characters. So yeah, there's a lot of made up words. So yeah, watch the movie first if you had trouble with this. It helped me with this, and then I wanted to read it again. So that was the first one I finished in 2024. Then one of my favorite music artists, Aurora, came out with this like notebook style book about the album that was most recent at the time, called The Gods We Can Touch. These books are beautiful. They have lyrics, they have her notes about the album, they have some beautiful pictures of her from the studio. I loved this. It's not like a hard read. It's basically her journal that she's just published bravely. So I read it. She's very inspirational. I loved seeing it in her own handwriting, her own drawings, things like that. This went pretty quickly. I mean, 1, it was motivating and fun, but 2, it's not, you know, like not every page is full of words to read. So yeah, I love these. If you're an Aurora fan, pick these up. It gives you a whole new dimension into her albums. I'll get to the second one that she put out in a minute here. After that, actually I read Dune, then Aurora, then Dune again. It had to do with the movies. Then I picked up the second Dune book, Dune Messiah. This is kind of a good like way to close the story of the Paul Atreides stuff, or let's say the Paul Atreides focused stuff. Dune, the first book, was rather laborious and like took me a while. It was dense in parts. This one just goes by really fast. I think it's more plot driven because you already kind of know the world. It picks up quite a few years, I think, after he becomes... Spoiler alert for some of these. I'm going to try not to. Some of them are quite popular, so most of you have probably read them. But I am going to provide a little information, so if you want no chance of spoilers, I'll timestamp it for each book, so feel free to skip it. You know, they gave Chani a lot more important stuff to do in the movies. Not so much in the books, but I still love her character. This definitely, like, kept me reading. So it was... I'm really curious to see how they're gonna put this into a movie, because it's... I think it's gonna be difficult, but maybe not as difficult as the first book. So I liked it. It was easier, and that's really all I have to say. Alright, then I decided I had to finish something that I had already started reading. And even though I wanted to continue with Dune, I was like, okay, let me finish something and then I'll go back to Dune World. So I just randomly picked up a book that I liked the cover and the dragon. So this is called Dragonworld. There's a couple of authors. I didn't read this specific book in my hand because the one I did read, the cover fell off and started to crumble, and then was just like, the book was literally falling apart. So I picked up a second one that had it was a little bigger, but it had a prettier cover on it. This is there's not as many dragons in it as I thought there would be for something called Dragonworld. It's mostly about this kind of false accusation, false belief war between these two peoples, but one of them in my head were hobbits, and then the other one is like I guess regular human kind of race, and they each think the other one has done something bad against them when in fact they haven't, and they kind of go on this war that doesn't make any sense because the instigating action didn't actually happen the way they think. So the whole time you're like, ugh, will you stop? Like, that's not how it went. Like, who is going to discover the truth? And they have a nice, like, kind of Bilbo Bagginsy kind of character who's like in between and trying to get to the truth. And it's really well done. I really liked the story. You can heavily see a Lord of the Rings influence, except there's dragons and there's some other creatures that kind of are dragon-like that serve an even bigger purpose. So I really enjoyed this. There's some falconry stuff in it that I'm debating doing a react to or an explanation of, because they get some things right and they get some things wrong, but it's a book about dragons, so they can do what they want. I'd never heard of that book before, but I'm very pleased that I picked it up, and I looked for a second one, but they don't have one. Then I read the third Dune book, Children of Dune, and this gets really weird. What can I say about it without spoiling anything? So, spoiler alert, Paul Atreides and Chani have twins. It's a boy and a girl. One of the weird things is that, you know, the Bene Gesserit, if you're into the Dune universe, are trying to produce, you know, these perfectly bred human characters to keep, like, the bloodline of the, you know, Kwisatz Haderach or whatever. Like, I said that horribly, but I don't think I've ever said that out loud before. Kwisatz Haderach? Okay. They're kind of still trying to, like, make one, even though Paul was considered that. So, if you can imagine keeping bloodlines pure, and there's twins of opposite genders, like what they might be pushing for, it gets really weird. That doesn't take place, but there's like pressure for it, and Paul's son is named Leto after his father, and he's considered Leto the second because he ends up in charge of some stuff. However, one of the things they dropped from the first Dune book in the movie is that Chani had already had a child with Paul, also named Leto. So where did he go in the line? Like, I guess he never ruled over anything, but he was technically the first child named Leto, and then stuff happened to him I won't go into. It was enough that I understand why they dropped him out of the movie, but like, this is about Paul's and Chani's, other two children, and it's good. The ending is also very, very weird. I kind of knew it was happening. It has to do with Leto II and sandworms becoming a little too close to each other, let's just say. But okay. I'm still interested in the universe. There's other characters in the second one and the third one, other kind of races of people. They're all humanoids, but like, yeah, it definitely develops the world. It widens it a bit. Fantasy books like this, fantasy worlds, like Dune, like Lord of the Rings, like Narnia even, like Game of Thrones, they make you feel like, when you're dropped into the world itself, there's dimension all around you. There's history that's talked about, but maybe not in the book. There's like characters on the side that are, have their own history and development and stuff. Like, it's almost like you could go anywhere in this world and there's something happening and it makes sense. It's so well developed and like amazing that these kinds of things come out of someone's brain. After that, I read a very serious book on Kindle because that's the copy that I could get a hold of at the time. Trigger warning. Trigger warning for racial injustice, racial violence, humiliation. I'll add some more to the screen if I think of more, but I want to make a whole video dedicated to this book's topic because it's very important, I think, to get out there. The book is called Spectacle. I don't have a physical copy, so I'll put a copy of the cover up. Sorry, I don't remember the author, but it's about a man named Oda Benga who was brought over from Africa, specifically the Congo. I think the name has changed of that country since this happened. This was the early 1900s. Specifically, I think the main incidents happened in 1908. So this was after the slave era in America. Now, was racism dead? Absolutely not. But, so Oda Benga, and we're not even sure if that was his full actual name or if he went by different names. He was put in a zoo in New York, which is supposed to be one of the most forward-thinking places, in the monkey house. I first heard about this story a few years ago, and I've been looking for the book at my free library that's not a library place for that whole time, but hadn't seen it pop up. And I was really thinking about it for some reason this year, decided to either order it and then or something, and then I saw it was free on Kindle with a trial or something. So I downloaded it and I took a lot of notes, highlighted a lot of things on it because I really do want to do a full video and talk about this man and what he went through. I was at first shocked that I had never heard of it, but then realized that, when people say Black history in the US is ignored, this is what they're talking about. White people were doing this to him. I think he came willingly from the Congo. He was here in America and then he went back with the person and then ended up coming back again, I believe. I don't have my notes in front of me. I know I just said I took a bunch of notes, but I don't have them in front of me. I'm sorry. But yeah, the second time over, the first time was humiliating enough. I won't go into that right now, but the second time he was put into a zoo in New York. I believe it was a few months, but he said that the apes were nicer to him than the white people that came to see him. And when the zoo was questioned about why this was happening and how wrong this was, they said, oh, he just takes care of the exhibit. and a whole bunch of other things. Mr. Benga, I'll just call him, it may be Mr. Oda Benga, but most of the time the last name was Benga. The author was obviously very researched in this, but going into what I was just about to say, he didn't speak English fully. So we don't hear a lot from his perspective at all, because he wasn't able to communicate it. So he was treated like an animal. He was treated like he had no brain in his head, and he clearly did. He was of small stature. He was what's called in the book a pygmy. I don't believe that word is really polite anymore, but I believe he was like between 4 and 5 feet tall. He had also filed his teeth into points. So the spectacle was like, look at this, strange looking human all the way from Africa. And like they were trying to say it was like the more primitive version of the white human. It was just infuriating, but important. So important to understand, because he was basically being kept captive in the North in the US after the Civil War in the US. In New York, like, which was supposed to be forward thinking. I thought it had a less sad ending. I don't know why I thought that exactly, but it broke my heart. It was infuriating. It wasn't told like a story so much as like chronologically what was going on. Actually, it wasn't chronological. It kind of jumped around, but I recommend it because of the topic. And the author was obviously very well versed in it. There's some pictures in it. But what a gut punch. Racism clearly didn't end once slavery was abolished. Even slavery as, an emotional and mental kind of phenomenon was still happening. It was a heavy one. So I had to read it kind of slowly. But yeah, spectacle, I do recommend. Okay, moving on to some lighter topics here. The next book I read is called The Transcriber by Kristen Wojtacki. I know her. I grew up with her, and it's a YA book, which I didn't realize it was, but that's how I knew that this book existed. She happens to be blind, and she also has a family and, like a normal life. Like, she is not hindered by her blindness whatsoever. This is written from the perspective of like a brother of a blind child and his like struggles with it. It's brilliant. And it's a YA book. It's like, kind of gives you a little moral of the story and an insight into what it's like, to grow up as a blind person, reading Braille, and, all of these things. So very quick read, very enjoyable, definitely recommend. Go check her out. She has another one that I want to pick up as well. It took me way too long to get these. I'm so sorry, Kristen. All right, then I saw the movie for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in the Hunger Games world. Fell in love with Rachel Zegler singing. And that story was, as always, with the Hunger Games stuff, like very engrossing and entertaining in a horrible way, and then twisty at the end. So I looked for this one, and I found it at the free library thing, and then read it. Stuff in here that that was definitely different, but a lot of it was the same. Totally enjoyed it. I just became very immersed in this world as well. It's another one that I guess, you get dropped in and then it kind of goes in all directions and you want to, explore this world. It's quite sad and it's, I don't know. It's hard to call these fun when it's about like children fighting to the death, and that's not a spoiler even. But this, yeah, at first I wasn't interested in like the background of President Snow, but then I saw the movie and I was like, okay, I have to see what's up with this interesting character called Lucy Gray, and so I did, and I read it. And even though I have read them multiple times, then I wanted to read the Hunger Games series again, so I did. I knew these would keep me motivated, even though I'd read them before. I fly through these. These are some of the, like, fastest reads, because I read the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one again. So I read 4 in the Hunger Games universe. I used the website Goodreads to log my reading of, like, you know, when I started it, when I finished it, my rating on it. I'm the Lady Anna over there if you want to come find me. But you can set challenges to read every year, and I set it at 15, even though I used to read so much more than that. But I knew these would help my book count, and I wanted to, like, read the President Snow stuff after reading this one and seeing, like, how it changed my mind, but he's almost barely in these. Like, it's through Katniss's eyes and not much, like, I don't know. So didn't give me as much insight as I thought this one. I'm not going to be able to stack them here, am I? But I still really enjoyed it. I'll probably read it again at some point. In between the first Hunger Games book, the, like, original trilogy, and the second one, I made myself finish another book that I had been reading on Kindle and the computer for a long time. This is another kind of heavy situation. I'm not going to get graphic or anything, I hope. I saw an interview with a woman named Mary Knight. I have to abbreviate it for YouTube's sake, but also for other survivors' sake, but she is a survivor of some very, very extreme SA by her parents and other people in their community. Through my research into DID, which I find a fascinating disorder, and psychology is just fascinating to me in general, but I've done some studies and watched channels of people with DID, and they don't always know all the trauma. They usually don't. There's at least parts of them that don't. And Mary Knight, I don't have the physical book, but I'll put up the title. She doesn't have DID, but she also didn't remember what had happened to her until she was 37. And this is how trauma works sometimes. You know, she didn't have, for some reason, you know, she didn't develop the dissociative disorder, but she remembered some of these horrible things when she was an adult. And it turns out that repressed memories and, like, recovered memories is a phenomenon that happens. And through my own mental health struggles, I found out about this right at the right time for my healing. It was just a really interesting read. She does list some of the most traumatic things that she's been through and that she's remembered. Sometimes she can verify these things, sometimes she can't. Many other people have gone through this phenomenon of not remembering it until they're older. It's a real thing. She also has a documentary about it where she actually interviews a lot of people who don't believe this is true. Most of them are offenders, so surprise, surprise, they try to deny that the victim is correct. But she, like, thoroughly tries to disprove herself and ends up proving that it's correct in the end. Trigger warnings for the movie, for sure. She has trigger warnings in each chapter of this book. It's not specific, but it's kind of like a low, medium, high, like you need to be careful, so you can just skip around. One of the things she focuses on, though, is that she's doing well. So despite all of this, you know, ritual stuff that happened to her, she has a happy life, and she wants to emphasize that. There is some, you know, religious involvement for her, you know, spiritual healing or whatever, so I don't know if you're sensitive to that, just ignore it, or maybe it gives you comfort, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, another very difficult book to get through because you really have to be in the right state of mind to not get triggered or not get very upset by these things. But the idea of repressed memories is just very interesting. Specifically, she focuses on the recovery part of it, where the part where you remember these repressed memories and why that might happen later in life. Your brain tries to protect you by putting these traumatic things in the back of your mind or pressing them down, under other things so that they're not constantly distressing you or you wouldn't be able to survive it. But when these things start to leak, out or start to get triggered out, it can be very disorienting. But it's something that other people have definitely gone through, and it was helpful yet difficult to read her book. I would recommend it, but again, be warned that there's some really disturbing stuff in there. Of all kinds of trigger warnings going on for that one. So then I went back to Hunger Games and just tried to clear my brain a little bit, went through the second and third one. Then, just for fun, and kind of because I had a video idea, I read a book on bearded dragons. It's one of these care guides. Now this one it came out in 1993. So my video idea was like, okay, what is correct? What isn't? What has changed? What hasn't? But I quickly realized, I'm not an expert on bearded dragons. I have a bearded dragon, but I don't know anything about breeding them other than that my dragon is an egg factory. I could definitely tell that some of this stuff was out of date, but I feel like, maybe I shouldn't make a video about it unless I really know what I'm talking about. I think I might just leave it at having a review of it on Goodreads that says what the scoop is. I learned that there's 8 different types of bearded dragons, and I didn't realize that. Or I forget if they're species or subspecies, but that was cool. But it says some stuff about they don't need a UVB light or something, and I'm like, ew, that's not true, because a lot of them don't get it and are horribly, horribly deformed. But yeah, that was fun. I'll probably just move on with my life, but I don't know, you might see a book review on bearded dragons or something. After that, Aurora's new album had come out, and I got the book that has to do with that one. I've been listening to this album since it came out, and I did a live stream of my reaction to it, the day it came out, I think. I did one for Some Type of Skin on the day that it came out, and that was super emotional. But I kind of did, I think it was the day the whole album came out, I did do a live stream. Again, gorgeous pictures, lyrics, her journal, just fascinating. She's so down to earth and inspiring. It's called What Happened to the Heart, and recommends. Kind of another easy read, but definitely motivated to do so. Then I found an Alf Kids book, and I was worried about hitting my goals, so I read it and counted it as one of my Goodreads books. It's outdated in every way possible, but it's cute, it's Alf, it's nostalgic for me, so it counts. Alright, and then the last one I finished this year is another heavy one, but in a totally different way. Still thinking about Ota Benga, I kind of wanted to get into the, Black history kind of topic a little more and continue to learn about stuff. So, I did choose a fiction book, but it's by Colson Whitehead, who is a Black American. Now, for those of you who don't know, African American at this time of recording is kind of, from my understanding, I'm not Black and I'm not claiming to know what that is like. But African American is kind of out because not all Black people are from Africa. Now, I know what you're going to say. Everybody is traced back to Africa archaeologically or whatever. Okay, yeah, fine. But, Black people are scattered throughout the world, and they don't necessarily think of themselves as African. So that's why I'm saying Black, capital B, Black, because I'm trying to be, non-offensive, clearly. So I hadn't read Colson Whitehead before. I thought this was going to be kind of a heavy read, and it was for topic, but his writing was very smooth to read. So the characters you start to love immediately, at least I did. Now, it's called The Underground Railroad. I thought it was going to be historical fiction about the actual Underground Railroad, which is a name for just a series of basically safe houses that would help get people out of the South into where they could actually be free people. I'm so sorry if I'm saying some of this wrong. I'm really trying hard, but correct me by all means, but gently, because I'm really trying here. When I was little, as I think other people have, I thought it was an actual railroad. I didn't know what, it meant. So it wasn't. But then in this book, which is fiction, it is. So I wanted to learn more about the Underground Railroad, even though this is fiction, but like it was an actual railroad in here. Symbolic. The symbolism in this book, I love a lot of symbolism, and this was full of it, and it was amazing. Oh my gosh, I just loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It was a smooth read. I was motivated to read it. Heavy topic, and some trauma happens to the main character, Cora, who starts out a slave. But the author isn't necessarily really gross about it. Some American authors, like modern American authors, it's like they have to describe the gross parts in like full detail. Like not as gross as like Stephen King or something, but like just unnecessary description or grossness. This doesn't. It either implies that bad things have happened, or it mentions them in a brief way and then moves on, because the relevant part is that the thing happened. It doesn't necessarily have to dwell on that scene. It just is part of the motivation for the character or whatever. There is a lot of physical violence in this, but I still didn't feel like it was overly gross. Like it was more about what it did mentally to the group of characters, or the main character. So even though the Underground Railroad is not an actual train, I learned a lot about it from this, like what it must have been like, what it felt like to like feel justified for bad things, because so many bad things were happening to you. Like it was just brilliant at putting you in the mindset of someone in this era in America, but also a unique character. So I loved it. I have another one of his that I want to read next year. I haven't started it yet. I think it's called, I forget what it's called, but something Zero. Anyway, heavy but quick read, and I loved it. So definitely recommend. It says there's an original series on Prime Video. I've not watched it. So with reading Dune twice, and doing the kind of cheat book, that was 17 books this year. I set my goal for 15. I'm not happy with that low of a number for me, but I'm also happy that at least I'm reading, because there was a year or two in there where I just didn't want to read at all. And that's very unlike me. That would be like if I suddenly stopped wanting to have animals or something. Like, that's not me. But I was going through a lot, and it just wasn't the priority at the time. But I'm getting back into it, and that makes me happy, because I feel like more like myself or something to actually want to be reading. So I don't know what my goal number is going to be for next year quite yet. Maybe I'll make it 16 and just try to go up from there. I mean, I love when I break the number, but I also don't want to put pressure on myself to do something that I'm trying to get back into, But let me show you what I'm reading now, because these are probably going to be the next things I'm finishing. I am into the second Outlander book. Now, I've seen the series. I really enjoy it. It can be very sexy, it can be very stabby, but it's also historical fiction. There's a lot of historical fiction in here. Anyway, it's a brick. As you can see, I'm on page 280 out of like 1,000. But, the first one is heavily based in 1700s Scotland. For most of this, they're in 1700s France. And it's just interesting to see, the inner workings, and there are real historical figures in this. It gets you interested in like Scottish history and like all of the branches of, how it developed. It's really good. I mean, it's a fantasy sci-fi on some levels. I mean, she goes back in time. So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of names in this book. Everybody French has like 18 names, but that's okay. I'm just underlining them so I can go back and be like, which one was this? Lately, I've been very motivated to keep going with it. I'm gonna try to finish this one first, and then I want to get back into the universe of Dune. I just finished the HBO show Dune Prophecy, which was like 10,000 years before Paul Atreides. But every review of it that I'm watching has like references to the fourth book in the original Dune trilogy, which is very heavily Leto II, that I mentioned earlier, in his kind of era. It's gonna be weird, I'm sure, but everything is like ending up referencing this book. So I think I have 11 or 12 of the Dune series of the 23 now that I've collected from the free library. I just couldn't find this one for the longest time. I have 5 and 6, but I couldn't find this one that's the fourth one. But I have it. I found it. It's even in paperback, so it doesn't take as much room on my shelf. And I started it. But I want to try to make myself finish something else on my TBR list, which is to be read if you don't know, before I just zoom through this one. But I'm very heavily motivated. Before I found this one, though, I had tried to start the first one in the Dune universe series of books, and that's Butlerian Jihad, which is about like the machine wars and like the stuff. It's like the first, it's not necessarily the first set of events. I mean, I guess it couldn't be like, where do you start in history, right? But it kind of sets up the world for what comes after. And I started this and then I found this. So this is going to be bumping this one down, but this is the fourth book in the original series, and this is the first book in like the canon. So this is going to be finished next year. I also received and started Patrick Stewart's memoir. I don't know why I'm not picking this up more. I'm probably about halfway through. I don't know. I think I'm trying to like remember it, like learn about his life so that I could like talk about it. I don't know. So I don't want to just like breeze through it and have it go out of my head. I'm like trying to actually like think about where he was and when and who, you know, he was working with. I mean, he's had a wonderful, amazing life, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I'm a huge Patrick Stewart fan, so this is definitely going to be finished in 2025 as well. So if you're still here, thanks for watching this video. I know it was a little bit of a departure, but the art part of this channel is whatever artistic things I get into, which is quite a lot. And I've been watching some booktube stuff and really enjoying it. I've been trying to get myself motivated to read more, trying not to put pressure on myself as far as quantity or like whether I should reread something, because there's so many books that I haven't read yet. But if I'm not excited about reading them, I'm not going to do it. So I'm trying to just follow the trail and read what I want. And there's books that I've wanted to read all around me at all times. I do have another stack of stuff that I've technically started, but I'm just not reading. It's been a couple years since I've picked some of them up, but I want to like remember how long ago I started them, so I'm keeping them in my Goodreads. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you're reading this year. Let me know what you like typically like to read. For me, it's like fiction, but it has to be like, it can't just be like people doing stuff, like going on a cruise or like vacationing in the south of France. It's like, give me some ghosts or time travel or murder or something. Like I want something that's like, you know, catches my attention, keeps me intrigued in it. Nonfiction, I don't, there's a lot of true crime, there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of memoirs I like, clearly. I don't know, it varies, but there's a lot of books in my house. I really do love to read. It's hard when your mind is racing, particularly at night, or you're trying to fight off a panic attack, and then you try to read, but like you're looking at it and not processing it because your mind is going crazy. But yeah, let me know what you like to read. Let me know how many books you typically read a year if you want. Go follow me on Goodreads if you want. Leave your Goodreads maybe in the comments. I don't know if you can actually leave links in the comments, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. One of her foci, 2024, if I had to qualify, quantify. But this went what am I trying to say? But this went pretty quickly, because it's not like, you know, it's not like a, you know, solid words, page and page and page. What am I trying to frickin' say, man? Construction noises. You know, these amazing books, like this, like Lord of the Rings, like Game of the Thrones. Hold on. There's a trash truck. Please don't start backing up. Oh god, what am I saying? Okay. When I first heard, I have, oh god. Shit, I just spilled my drink. I just pushed my books across the little table thing in front of me, and my drink was behind it, and I pushed it off onto the carpet. So, I spill drinks, like, I feel like a much higher I must spill my drink, like, I feel like way higher than the normal percentage of time that people spill their drinks. Anyway, it's mostly water, so it's not gonna be like a big sticky mess, thankfully, but, what was I saying? Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.